What is up, guys? My name is Lex. It is Friday night around 6 p.m. and I am here at the Bellagio. You can see the sports book behind me. That is the poker room. I showed up here about a half an hour ago looking to play a 10-20 game. When I come out here to Vegas, I want to try to play some bigger games, push myself, play bigger pots, play exciting pots. So I get my name on the list. There was about 8 or 10 people for the must-move game for the 10-20. They call the list, I sit down, and 2 other players sit down, and that is it. So I'm playing 3-handed now with 2 other very, very good French poker professional players. I play for about 30 minutes and decide, you know what, this is not the kind of game I want to be in. Nobody else showed up, so I left the 10-20 game, went over to the 5-10 game. I bought it for $1,500. Let's see how it goes. Maybe later on in the night I can get into the 10-20, we'll see. But anyway, that's it for the intro. Let's get down to the table, let's get to the action. Let's go. Welcome back to the vlog. I've got a lot of hands for you guys from this Friday night session at the Bellagio. Next hand here, I raise from early position to $30 with ace 4 of hearts. Folds back over to the big blind, who is a reg who normally plays at Aria, but she's over here at the Bellagio today. She ends up making the call. So we go heads up to queen 6-7 2 hearts. I flopped the nut flush draw and 1 over card. I would say it's a pretty good board for me. I continue for a $40 bet. And now my opponent in the big blind check raises me to $170. If we break down her particular value hands in this situation, it's actually pretty thin. She's basically only representing sets and 2 pairs when she check raises here. I don't think she's check raising a single pair queen. She should never have pocket queens for top set because she just called pre-flop. I don't think this particular player is calling pre-flop with queen 6 or queen 7. So for value, she's representing pocket 6s, pocket 7s, and 6-7 suited. That's really not that many hands. She can have a bunch of straight draws, flush draws, gut shot straight draws as bluffs that she's check raising on this board. I decided to just call $170 and see what happens on the turn, which is the deuce of diamonds. Now, my opponent covers me. I have about $1,500 left in my stack, and she continues for a $400 bet. I've said this before in the past, I like to go with my gut when I'm playing poker. Sometimes my gut makes me look like a genius and sometimes it makes me look like a complete idiot. And my gut was telling me in this situation that she wasn't too strong. I felt like she had a combo draw, a straight draw or flush draw or a gut shot straight draw that she was just trying to blast off with. Well, if I had a pair, I would just call her down. But I don't have a pair. I just have ace high. What do I do if I call here? The river's a brick and she shoves. Like I said on the flop, I don't think she has too many combos of value on this board. I think she has a lot more semi-bluffs as well. I don't feel like calling here and have to fold the river if I have the best hand, so I decide to rip it all in for my last $1,600, and she makes a very quick fold, which means we probably had the best hand with ace high. I don't think she's folding that quickly with even a queen, but either way, we end up taking this one down. Still at the same must-move table, I raise ace-10 offsuit to $30. Small blind calls, big blind calls, 3 ways to 10-9 deuce rainbow. Top pair, top kicker, I continue for $60 in the 2 players, and only the big blind calls. Heads up to the 9 of hearts on the turn. Now pairing the board, he checks, and I continue to bet here for $110, thinking I can get value from straight draws, flush draws, worse 10x hands as well. And now my opponent check raises me to $240. Not liking this spot, my opponent looks like a recreational player. I don't think he's doing this with anything but a very strong hand, but we're out here in Vegas on a Friday night. You just have no idea what these people could be doing at 5-10. It's only $130 more to me. I have top pair, top kicker. I also have the 10 of hearts in my hand, so I can maybe even use that as a bluff candidate, depending on what the river is. So I make the call and we see the 5 of hearts on the final card. Action over here on the big blind who check raised me earlier on the turn, and he does not give up on the aggression. He continues now for $500. So turning my 10 of hearts into a bluff versus this sizing is just out of the question now. Now I have to figure out, should I call or fold? Well, top pair, top kicker is very good on this board, but I am losing to all 9x hands. I'm losing to slow played sets, pocket deuces, maybe somehow he could have pocket jacks. I don't think even pocket jacks bets this big. I contemplate folding, I contemplate calling. It's only $500, it's less than the pot. So eventually I put in the chips and get shown, of course, the bad news, Queen 9 offsuit for trips. I was very disappointed in myself after this hand. I went with my gut was telling me to call, and like I said, sometimes my gut is completely and utterly wrong. I just feel like it's always a fold here on the river, and I got stubborn, made the call, ended up costing myself over $700. I feel like this does happen more often when I play just a 5-10 game. I'm used to playing a little bit bigger where the money and bet amounts are a little bit higher, so not to sound too big time, but sometimes I make terrible calls just because it's not that much when it comes to the money. I got to try to work on that. I got to try to think of it more as big blinds. Anyway, next hand there's a $20 straddle. I decide to raise from early position to $40 with Jack 9 of spades. Back over to the straddle, who seemed to be playing a lot of hands, but not playing too aggressive pre-flop, re-raises me to $140. In position with a suited jack, I make the call, and we go heads up to King 6-7 with 1 spade. I completely miss here, other than just having some backdoor draws, and my opponent continues for a $230 bet. Well, this hand should be over, right? Well, maybe a little bit of tilt is steaming off from that last hand. Maybe I'm thinking in my mind I could bluff on later streets. I could potentially represent hands if he checks to me on the turn. So I decide to float here in position with Jack high, and the turn card gives us some more outs with the 4 of spades. Back over here on the straddle, who 3-bet pre-flop and bet on the flop, and he now continues. He bets $420 with about $1,600 left in his stack. I'm not really sure what got into me in this situation and this session, but I just kind of felt like playing like a maniac. I don't know why, but I just felt like if I jammed here, he would fold a lot of hands. Vegas games are notoriously nitty, and people make big folds when facing big aggressive bets. I felt like if I jammed here, he would fold out every single hand except for aces, ace-king, and king-queen. He's going to have a lot of hands here like ace-queen, ace-jack, queen-jack suited, and other possible ace-high hands as well. So instead of calling here, I decide to rip it all in with my jack-high flush draw, and luckily, he folds right away. Later on told us he had ace-queen. So not my favorite play. I feel like we're going to get snapped off here a lot of the time, but I just went with it, and luckily this time it worked for us. I was pushing for the mandatory straddle to be on under the gun, and it looks like everybody is down for that. So the game is now 5-10-20. I raise queen jack of diamonds to $40. Big blind calls, straddle calls, 3 ways to ace, jack, jack, rainbow, flopping trips. All right, finally we made a hand. No bluffing this time. Checks over to me, and I bet $50. The straddler makes to call. Turn card 5, and I continue now for an $80 bet. I bet relatively smaller on this turn card just to try to keep him in there with all of his range. I want him to call with every ace. I want him to call with gut shots. I want him to call with flush draws, and maybe even some unbelieving pocket pairs. He does decide to make the call, and the board double pairs on the river. So now we have jacks full of 5s, essentially the nuts, unless he somehow has aces or ace-jack, which is very unlikely. He checks to me, and this particular player had just gotten stacked about 20 minutes before this. He seemed to be a little steamed up from that hand. I felt like if I overbet big here, he may level himself into a call with an ace-x hand. If he has king high or queen high, he's just going to fold no matter what I bet. So I decided to go big here and bet $530, really trying to get max value from an ace-x hand. No more value for us in this hand. My opponent folds fairly quickly. It is somewhat tough to find good 5-10 games out in Vegas, but I have definitely found one at this table. There's a ton of money. We're doing 5-10-20. There's a bunch of players who don't look like Euro robots, so I think I've found a good table, and it's just going to get better from here. This next hand kind of showcases the craziness. I looked down at ace-king in the small blind, and there's an under-the-gun raise to $150 over a $20 straddle, so almost an 8x raise size here from the under the gun player. With ace king, I consider flat calling, but I feel like he can have some pocket pairs, some worse ace high hands as well. I don't want to call and allow other people to call behind me, so I bump it up big to $500. I'm extremely deep stack with this particular player for this game. He's got about $3,500 and I slightly cover him. Back over to him and he thinks for a little bit of time and calls 500. Over $1,000 in the middle in a 3-bet pot. The flop comes out ace, jack, 7, 2 diamonds. We flop top pair, top kicker, but that pesky jack is a little bit concerning just because I feel like he can have pocket jacks here a decent amount of the time and possibly ace jack as well. But I'm not going to check. I bet out $300 and I get snap raised by my opponent to $700. This is an extremely strong play. One, he raised to $150 under the gun when the normal raise size is $50. He then called my re-raise of $500 and now is raising me to $700 on an ace high board. This is very concerning, but my hand is just way too strong to fold. He could be blocking here with ace queen. He could have a flush draw. He's trying to block me as well, basically meaning he's going to raise the flop and then check back most turn cards. I decide to call and we see the 10 of hearts on the 4th card. I check over to him and now he slows down and immediately checks back. So on the flop when he raised and then now checked back this turn card, I do feel like he was kind of blocking me there, trying to set his own price for the river. I feel like he can have a couple hands. 1, ace queen, that would probably play like this, and 2, a lot of flush draws as well. So when the river card's to 4 of clubs, I do feel like we are ahead here with our top pair, top kicker, but it's just very thin to bet out. I feel like the only hand that we're going to get called by here if I bet is ace queen, but if I check, he may turn those missed flush draws into a bluff and try to get me off a single pair ace as well. So I decided to go with option B and check, trying to induce a bluff, but it doesn't work when he snap checks back. I show the ace king and it is good, and later on he told me he had pocket kings, which is quite odd. I guess he was just trying to see where he was at on the flop and then check it down from there, but I don't think pocket kings calls the $1,000 river bet, so I feel fine with the way I played this one. Before we move to the next hand, I want you guys to pause the video, go down in the comments, and let me know what you would do in this situation with ace king. Would you lead out on the river? Would you check to try to induce a bluff? Would you go all in on the flop? Let me know down in the comments below. At this point, the table is getting very good. Really not many pros on the table. There's a ton of money. We're straddling. The pots are getting big, but I am very sleepy. It's around 12 a.m. I just traveled here a couple of days ago. I've been grinding 3 days straight, so I decided to take advantage of the free drinks that they offer here at the Bellagio and get myself some whiskey and an IPA to try to wake me up a little bit. Speaking of drinks, when I went to college, I first started out at Virginia Tech and wrestled there for 2 years. Now, while I was a student athlete, I really couldn't drink too much just between training, trying to keep up with school, and traveling. So for 2 years, I hardly ever went out or drank at all. But then after I quit wrestling, I moved closer to home and went to West Virginia University, which is a huge party school. I was then partying every weekend, also working at a bar as a bouncer and a bar back until I graduated in 2016. Now, after a couple of years of partying in college, I just kind of got burnt out from that lifestyle. And I would say from the ages of 24 to maybe 30, I probably only drank maybe a handful of times. So I will say as a 190-pound guy, I am an extreme lightweight when it comes to alcohol. 1 or 2 drinks and I'm already feeling a little bit hazy. In this hand, I'm about halfway through my beer and halfway through my whiskey. So to be honest, I don't really remember what the board was, but I remember I had pocket kings. There was 2 aces on the flop, and I ended up folding here on the river and losing to ace 9 offsuit. In this next hand, I decided to put on the double straddle. So the game is 5, 10, 20 with a $40 double straddle by me, and I get dealt in ace queen offsuit. On the double straddle, I would say that is very, very nice. Folds all the way here to the big blind who calls 40. Now the straddle, the $20 straddle folds, and then the dealer gets confused and doesn't know that I double straddled. So I take my option and make it $120 more, and the big blind calls. Heads up to ace, queen, jack, rainbow. He checks, and I decide to trap and check back. Turn queen, giving me a full house. He checks again. I check back again. River card 10 of clubs, bringing in a flush, and now a one-liner to any king makes a straight. My opponent leads out for a $100 bet, and I raise it up to $500, but he folds. What I didn't show you guys was all the small pots that I lost on this session, so even though I have won some decent pots, I'm really not up that much money, just because that first couple hands that I lost earlier on, and then I'm losing just small to medium-sized pots. But my stack is looking fairly good. Now I decide to get myself another beer and then move on to this next hand, where there's a raise and a call, and I peel back King Queen of clubs in the big blind and decide to 3-bet squeeze here to $250. Initial raiser gets out of the way, but the cutoff makes the call. The player who called my 3-bet here is a very active player. He had about $1,000 probably 2 hours ago, and now he's running all the way up to over a $6,000 stack. He really hasn't seen any 2 cards he doesn't like pre-flop. He's playing basically every single hand. He calls my 3-bet. We go heads up out of position to a King 10-8 board. Flopping top pair, but it is somewhat of a connected board. There is some 2 pairs, some sets, and some big straight draws that he could have, but I'm not going to check a hand as strong as mine, so I bet out $180, and he makes the call. Turn card pairs the board, it's another 8, and if we were looking at normal 3-bet call ranges from the cutoff here, he probably is not going to have many 8x holdings in his range. He's going to have a lot of Broadway cards, ace-high hands, 10x hands, and king-x hands, so normally I would continue to bet here, but against this player, I consider checking just because I feel like he can have every 8 in the deck because he's playing every single hand, but I don't want to give a free card to those straight draws, worse king-x hands, worse 10x hands, and also ace-high hands as well. So I continue for a $330 bet. My plan here is if he calls, I'll most likely check the river just because I have a 1-pair hand, and that is exactly what happens when the 3 of diamonds comes off. I check, and he instantly checks back. I show the king queen, and it is good. He told me he had a 10 and folds. After this hand, I decided to get myself another free beverage here at the Bellagio and then raise it up with King Jack offsuit to $60. Big blind and straddle calls. 3 ways to King Queen 7 2 clubs. Top pair Jack kicker when it checks to me. I bet out $100. Big blind folds, straddle calls. Heads up now to the Jack on the turn, giving me 2 pair. Does bring in some straights, but I'm not going to slow down. I bet $110 before the straddler check raises me to $330. This is somewhat of a concerning situation just because I don't think he's ever bluffing in this situation. I feel like he can definitely have a straight with ace-10 or 9-10. He could have a set of 7s. Really, the only hand we're beating here is Queen Jack, which is a worse 2 pair. But I'm getting a good price to try to boat up here on the river. He has about $1,500 left in his stack. Let's hit a full house, and the board does pair, but it's the Queen of Diamonds, so it gets worse for us. We end up getting counterfeit. And now the straddle who check raised on the turn bets out $400 here on the river. A nasty spot to be in. We get counterfeit. We're getting a great price to call, though. Could we ever be good here on this river? Not quite the river I wanted. Almost full house.
It doesn't look right. I wasn't
If you have Queen Jack, that would be very sick. You probably have a straight. All right.
For the vlog.
Oh, God. Can I show it? Wait. That was a good river, sir. Good river.
And a good laydown.
Nice hand.
Mucking monsters.
A very unfortunate river for us in this situation. In this hand, there is a $50 raise. I call with pocket 7, small blind calls, big blind calls, straddle calls, 5 ways to King 10-7. We flop a set. Action checks all the way to me, unfortunately, so no raises on this board. And I decided to bet out a big bet of $160. Small blind makes a very quick call. and everybody else folds. Turn deuce of diamonds, bringing in a flush draw. Small blind checks, and I quickly bet out $410, and he calls very quickly now. Pot is brewing up here, and the 5 of diamonds rolls off on the river. Now, all the straight draws on the flop miss. 8-9 suited misses, queen jack misses, ace queen misses, ace jack misses, but a backdoor flush gets there. Our hand is very strong, but we're losing to a flush, but we're still beating, obviously, all top pairs or potential 2 pairs. So when he checks on this river, I got to figure out what bet sizing should I use. I could go very large, but if I go huge here on the river, it's just going to look super strong, and I don't want him to hero fold a hand like king 9 or king jack. So I decide to bet $480, but he snap folds very quickly, and he tells us he had queen jack for a straight draw and missed, and this ends up being our last hand of the night. Definitely did not want to leave this game, but I was exhausted. It was past 3 a.m. and I knew I had to pace myself because the very next day I knew I'd have to be back and filming and playing another session for the vlog as well. So I called it a night here, and I will say this table was actually a lot of fun. Everybody was talkative, everybody was straddling and giving action. It probably had something to do with the fact that I won over $2,000, that I was having such a good time, or the fact that I consumed a lot of free beverages as well. But about 3:15 a.m. I take all my chips to the cage and end up depositing them into my account so that I don't have to worry about traveling down the strip with any cash on me. But this is going to be the end of this video. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. And until next time, I'll see ya.